And my challenge is for coaches and athletes and content creators on YouTube to make informational videos discussing
the pros and cons of the muscle-up exercise.
Before I start, I want to say that my motivation for making this video comes from the recent upload of James from Shredded Sports Science. I highly recommend you to check out his content if you haven't yet. I mean, his channel is exactly what the online fitness needs at the moment. No gimmicks, no bullshit information, backed up by science. When I heard about the Muscle Up Challenge for the first time, I got hyped immediately, as that's exactly the type of content I want to provide on this channel. I was so excited to the point that I even messaged James privately and told him about my plans, to put the extra pressure on me and absolutely assure that I'm gonna make this video happen. And so I was really pleased by receiving his response, which made me spin my wheels even harder. So once again, thank you James, and let's get to the main topic. The muscle up, the true strength indicator or just a party trick. Let's get to it. Getting on the pull-up bar by pulling up from the dead hang. Who knew that as simple movement as that might be the one that will change the whole history of bodyweight fitness? I mean, what is the first move that comes to your mind when thinking about calisthenics? What is the first move everyone wants to learn at the beginning of their bodyweight journey? What is the move that separates badasses and losers in physical education classes in high school? What has made street workout videos famous in the first place? The only thing that may compete with muscle up that comes to my mind is the human flag. However, it has that label of an advanced skill. Because it looks impossible, it must be hard, therefore unobtainable for most people. And muscle up is just like pull up, but you end up on a bar. It's simple. It is hard, but it's simple, right? Exactly this combination of simplicity and cool status made me start my journey. I will never forget hours, weeks and months battling with this skill. He was coming in and walking away. Them sleepless nights spent thinking about him, making me delusional and playing with my feelings. It's fair to call our relationship toxic. The origins of the muscle up obviously come from gymnastics, where it's one of the most simple ways to get on top of the rings to the support position. But it's rather used in training than competition due to its low difficulty level. The bar muscle up got its popularity thanks to street workout, where people originally used that as one of the exercises to build strength and aesthetics using only the body weight and no external object. It was that one step above pull-up that gave you the respect in the hood. What's interesting is that it has also been popularly used in training for firefighters, for example, as it fits the specificity of this profession, making it functional for them. Its attractiveness couldn't be omitted, and at the early 2000s it got absorbed by CrossFit. Till this day, muscle up is being portrayed as a relative strength feat, and there are multiple events in which it is the part of the final competition score. Alright, so we have a brief view on the muscle up history. We also know why and how it got famous and where it's being used. The whole story was listened by John. He trains mainly for aesthetics purposes, but lately he's been focusing on performance and longevity. His goal is improving his strength and overall athleticism without risking injury, so he can become the best version of himself. John is most people who attend the gym, hopefully. Let's answer the question, should John start practicing muscle ups? Now, this video is not a technique guide, I want to stress it out. However, knowing the differences between each version of muscle up is very important to understand my next points, so let's get through them very quickly. Oh, and before I start, I want to stress out again that this video addresses the muscle up for an average gym goer, not the calisthenics athlete, because in this case the muscle up becomes sport-specific exercise and of course is the foundation of the variety of different evolutions and skills. So we are not gonna discuss that because it doesn't make sense. I personally divide the muscle up for 3 versions. The first one is the kipping version, where we use the momentum generated by our lower body to get over the rings or the bar. We can differentiate a gymnastics kip, CrossFit kips, and we have to remember that kip doesn't equate skip. Sometimes the kip is just a mild support that helps us get over the bar or rings, and sometimes we don't even use that much of an upper body to begin with. Then we rather call it a kip up than muscle up. The second way of performing muscle up is what I call explosive. Now, this one is not very often practiced on rings, but on a bar it's the most commonly presented one. Usually when people think about the muscle up, they associate it with this exact form. In the explosive version, we basically use the force generated by pulling up in a fast, explosive manner. Thanks to it, we get thrown over the bar. Unlike the previous one, this version does require strength. But it's even more important to understand the proper curve pulling mechanics and being explosive, as I already mentioned. In this case, what might be useful is applying the stretch reflex, which is a mechanism of fast contraction following muscle stretch. The final form of the muscle up is the slow, controlled version. If you're doing a non-kip muscle up on rings, the high chance is that you're actually doing a controlled version, as the instability of rings doesn't allow to create a mentioned curved and explosive pull as much. Then you're kind of forced to push through this transition phase with your strength. On a bar, this version becomes even more difficult, as you can't really use your shoulder extension mobility because the bar blocks you. The absolute essence of the slow muscle up is the false grip. The false grip is used in this version particularly, as turning hands around the bar is almost impossible without a fast motion. And I want to underline the word almost, because actually you can find clips and even tutorials on this move online. Whatever variation we want to discuss and you want to choose, there are benefits that apply to every single muscle up form, and of course there are some extras that individual form bring to the table. So let's find out how John can possibly benefit from the muscle up. Muscle up, just like the majority of bodyweight movements, is a closed kinetic chain exercise, which is a fancy term for the ones that moves your body through space. Based on the study done by the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy, the closed chain movements were responsible for 31% increase in lower body strength after only 6 weeks period, where the open chain group only improved 13%, which definitely shows the effectiveness of these type of exercises. The obvious benefit of muscle up is the pulling strength. So I mentioned that the non-kip muscle up on a bar requires the explosive pull, and it's even more than that. It forces you to pull explosively. So let's see how we can use it. For more advanced athletes, the muscle up might be a good activation CNS fire up type of movement, as the studies suggest that performing concentric in the fastest possible manner is the best way from the strength building standpoint. The fact you can do one strict muscle up on a bar usually means that your pull up is at around 35 to 40% of your body weight attached. So if you weigh 80 kilos for instance and you are able to perform a muscle up, you are probably also able to perform a pull-up rep with 30 kilos, which is an impressive feat of strength already that most people can't do. And remember that it equates just to one strict muscle up on a bar. When it comes to the pushing strength, not as much is required in terms of explosive muscle up, as that basically ends up with straight bar dip at the end, which is the least demanding part of the exercise. So far the potential benefits are very pleasing. But given that muscle up is hard exercise, plus there is risk involved about which later on, why can't we just focus on weighted pull-ups and weighted dips? Is that gonna make really a difference? I mean, you run an independent progression in which non-movement is inhibiting the progress in another, and you're doing exactly same thing, aren't you? And this is false, because you're not. Just like you can be the fastest swimmer with the best jump and you're still gonna lose without a proper turn, being able to do pull-ups and straight bar dips alone won't give you muscle up because you need the transition, which is a beauty and the essence of any kind of muscle up. Let's look outside the box for a moment, which in the gym world we kind of tend to overlook. We have to remember that it's the linking of abilities that is the essence of sports, and that's why even keeping muscle up will be always a better display of coordination and timing than just doing pull-ups and dips alone. But I do understand that John might still not be 100% satisfied, so let's move to another benefits that transition provides. While it doesn't play as big of a role in the keeping or explosive version, the controlled muscle-up transition is a totally different ballgame. And you may ask, what such a small range of motion might bring to the table? Well, first of all, they do require false grip, which is a feat of forearm flexor strength and wrist mobility. Next, especially on the bar version, tremendous triceps activation, including all three heads of the muscle, thanks to the shoulder extension involved. Finally, the rings version forces us to be in a very deep stretch position under the load, which adds the shoulder extension mobility component. Now, while pull-ups are rather on the safe zone when it comes to the injury risk, and dips are as well for most people, although costochondritis is a very popular condition among trainees that may be triggered by doing weighted dips or dips in general. And we also have to stress out that some people are just not anatomically built for this movement. Muscle up, by bringing extra benefits related to the transition, unfortunately provides some additional risk. Let's get over the factors that may be the triggers of potential injuries, and let's finally assess if muscle up risk to gain ratio is pleasing enough to incorporate it to John's routine. As we finished on slow muscle ups, let's continue and let's start with them. As I mentioned already, one of the elements required for the controlled version is the false grip. What might be the potential danger? Well, two things to consider. First of all, your forearm needs to be properly conditioned for this kind of stress placed by flexed position. Without strengthening and with improper training load management, this might lead to potential overuse injuries of this area, which might include medial epicondylitis, also known as golfer's elbow. The second thing is required wrist flexion mobility. Believe me that in case of untrained person who hasn't had any contact with this type of position in the past, attempting to load the fully flexed wrist with the body weight of this person might not be the best idea. So again, we have that preparation time needed in order to perform this move safely, and it's just because of one element. The whole nother sort of issues comes with the keeping or explosive version. This time mainly in the acute injury or accident form. The very common one might be actually observed in CrossFit gyms, where very often individuals who are untrained and unprepared when it comes to the ring's support stability attempt the rings muscle up with enormous kip. I don't have to underline the terrible consequences related to losing control at the top and falling forward as you get on the rings. Falling in this manner is just a recipe for muscle tear or shoulder sprain. The risk of falling over doesn't really exist in the bar version, as the bar is gonna stop you, unlike the rings. However, in terms of this variation, what is a very common picture in gyms and parks are people who try to compensate their lack of explosiveness by performing uneven transition initiated with one arm, also known as chicken wing muscle. Apart from the potential for muscle imbalances in the long run, this way of performing move puts a lot of abrupt pressure on internally rotated, abducted shoulder, the position that doesn't belong to the safest one for many people at least. What's worth mentioning is the width of the grip. The safest in my eyes grip to perform muscle up on a bar is the shoulder width grip. It is also more difficult considering that you have to pull higher to perform transition, in contrast to wide grip version. The good question is the flawless form muscle up safe? And I think that it's fair to say that it is. But don't let that dismiss the fact that it is very, and I mean very hard to maintain the proper technique, given that many people do this exercise as an ego booster in the first place. And believe me, these are not the people that are going to stop one rep before hitting technical failure. And from that point, many dangerous compensation mechanisms that I've been describing come into play. That differs muscle up from pull up, for example, where even at the very high intensity, we are not able to do much that would put us in the risky spot. So this time has arrived. Considering all the benefits and risks that muscle up provides, is it worth your time? And the answer is... it depends. As annoying as that answer might be, what I really want to say is that you have to answer this question yourself. Are you willing to suck it up, put the work in the preparation phase, progress slowly and not let your ego overtake you? If that's the case, muscle up is for you. It's a great exercise that provides lots of benefits regardless the variation that you're gonna choose. Plus, there are multiple ways to make it even more challenging. You can play with tempo, with reps, and you can even add weight to the exercise. Another question is the muscle up true test of strength? Well, considering the pull-up carryover, done with proper technique, I think it's fair to call muscle up to be an upper body relative strength feat, at least for pulling strength. So this is it. This is all I have to say on this topic. I hope I gave you an idea on whether the muscle up is an exercise for you or not. And if you decided that it is, then use it wisely and reap all the benefits. And if you got to the end, then please leave your thoughts on this form of videos and feel free to give me the suggestion for the next subject. Hashtag the muscle up challenge, signing out. And it's harder. And it's hard, but it's simple. Yeah. Is that it has also been... What's interesting is that it has also... In training for firefighters, for example, in training for firefighters, firefighters.